And I'm going to start things off. I'm Jennifer Coffey from OSEP in the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. And I saw a presentation today that made me very hopeful. It was the group that does our captioning and description. And they were talking about some of the successes that they've had. YouTube, PBS are all trying to make their products, what they have available, more accessible. And they were just having this big impact. The CEO of Netflix was part of it. So, or not Netflix, sorry, YouTube. So that made me really hopeful. And then spring-wise, being in DC, I love the cherry blossoms. And where I walk my dog, which is actually a cemetery, has really good cherry blossoms as well as the tidal basin. So I'm seeing a lot of sharing in the chat, but if anyone wants to share by mic, you're welcome to as well. I'm asking about what you like about spring and what makes you most hopeful. And I have allergies because it's spring. So there's that. Good. Got wildflowers. Spring renewal. Young people. Longer days. Synergy across states. I love that. Warm weather and pretty colors. Budding trees. I love that too. Rain. I grew up in Southern California. Rain was very exciting for me when I was growing up. Cherry blossoms, daffodils. Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome. We have a lot of good things to share today. So we're going to get right into it. So I'm Jennifer Coffey, as I said, from OSEP. Also with us is Kelsey. Kelsey, do you want to share something about spring and your what makes you hopeful?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey. I'm from Eugene, Oregon. I think my favorite thing right now is I have the best view in the office outside my window with all the trees. So as soon as they turn green and start blooming, that's, I think, one of my favorite things.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, I love Eugene. If you haven't been to Eugene, Oregon, I highly recommend it. Any season, but summer's probably the best. All right, so we are so happy that you're here with us today. We have two great presentations coming up. Prior to getting into that, though, I do want to talk about where we're coming from, why these presenters are talking about the topics they're talking about. So and thank you for the reminder, Kelsey. Private reminder, please do change your names, your Zoom name, so that you have your state name at the end of it. We're going to be doing a breakout. We're going to be doing the breakout using your state information. And so if you could please change your Zoom name to add your state at the end of it, we would be very appreciative. All right. So just walking us back a little bit to the national meeting, we had Stephanie Autumn present at that time. Most of you saw her keynote. If not, we have it recorded and up on our website, so you can see that anytime you'd like. Stephanie got us going, thinking about the importance of relationship, about the importance of working with the community, working with students, working with families, really trying to understand each other. And the fact that that is where you're going to see the most impact. It's not just that you're doing that because someone told you to do it, or it's the right thing to do. You're also doing it because that's how you're going to get the most impact. And so for the last few meetings, we've been getting down a little bit deeper into that. Our last webinar was with Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools and the Idaho SPDIG, talking about their work with the library system in Idaho. I highly recommend it. I'm going to put the link in the chat in just a second so you can access it if you didn't already see it. It was fantastic, but they were talking about those engagement efforts at a different level, the student engagement, the family engagement, the community engagement, and the different ways they were going about that. So we're going to continue thinking about community engagement today, and student engagement also for the Montana SSIP presentation. Hopefully you had a chance to look at this pre-activity that Kelsey sent out from the School Mental Health Initiative from Kansas. If not, I think this presentation will still work for you, but it's available to you. I did want to point out, it is a fantastic idea when you're giving a presentation one, to give people pre-work, that's great, but also to have something one page that leads you to other links that gives you the highlight of the information, which is what Kansas has done here. So I just want to point out, this is definitely a best practice. I do also want to share with you, New Jersey shared their mental health framework that has just gone out, their guidance. And so I'm going to also plug that into the chat so everyone can have access to another state's work related to this. I've asked all of our presenters today to tell us why they came to this work. What about this work did they think is so important, and how did they get to it? And also share one thing about themselves that most people don't know. So just kind of a fun fact about themselves, and then the how and why they came to this work. So thank you everyone for adding your state name at the end. And I will go ahead and turn it over to our Kansas team.
Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and let my team introduce themselves. I have a place in there later, but I don't want to forget the one interesting thing, and I will as soon as I get into it. So my name is Cherie Blanchett. I'm a project coordinator for the Kansas School Mental Health Initiative. One interesting thing about me, my first motorcycle had training wheels. Lee Stickle.
Okay, hey, my name is Lee Stickle and I'm the project director. I came to this work from another area, which is autism, and I saw such an increase in the number of kids with ASD that were also experiencing co-occurring mental health conditions. So not having any background in that, I was fortunate to be able to hire Cherie, who has that background, learned a great deal from her, and then recognized that the need was much greater generally than just not confined to kids with autism. Interesting thing about me that people may not know is I spend almost every summer weekend on a boat, and I love it, and yet I cannot swim a stroke.
She wears floaties. Let's see here. Kristen has been on the team the longest after Lee itself.
Hi, I'm Kristen Sheldon, state trainer with the School Mental Health Initiative. My background's in social work, and had the fortune of meeting Cherie even when I was getting my master's. And then I've been with this team initially when we started with the Autism and Tertiary Behavior Supports Project. Gosh, it's been almost, I think, 6 years. So it's hard to believe. But, oh, and one interesting thing about me, gosh, I feel like there's not very many. I recently moved, which has been an exciting change in my life. So moved from Topeka, which is the state capital, to Kansas City. So enjoying the big city life.
And then my girls, Laura and Amy, came on right as we were asked by Miss Carrie here to facilitate this SPDIG. We're saving the best for last here because there's Carrie, but Amy and Laura, do one of you two want to jump in?
I'm a state trainer, Amy Wells, and I came to this work because I was a building principal trying to do some of these things on my own in a single building, and kept running into some really funny, hard walls, and always had that desire to see if I could get some support from above me, and had the pleasure of meeting Miss Cherie on a very exciting School Mental Health Advisory Council. So that was a time where I got to see what was happening at the state level and was just excited to see that people cared as much as I did about this topic, perhaps more. I don't have anything interesting. I have 3 kids. I don't have a life.
Mine for the presentation.
Okay.
Miss Laura?
I'm Laura Hatchup. I am a clinical social worker. My background's in school social work. Cherie and I met in grad school and did our practicum together. I stayed in the schools longer than she did, and then was fortunate to come over to learn more about the state level work, which has been really fascinating. And one interesting thing about me, I play the piano.
And she plays randomly at conferences. If there's a piano, you might hear her. Last but not least, and the person who really has helped us make this work possible here in Kansas is, of course, Carrie Haig, which I think a lot of you know, but I'm really looking forward to this one thing people don't know about Carrie.
Well, the reason I'm invested in this work is because of my time here at KSDE, which has been decades. There's always, there's always been the need to have more support in schools for mental health. And I finally saw the opportunity for us to move that work forward and utilize the SPDIG to help grow that. And I did build the need for it as well as the recognition for it. And that was prompted by the needs that Lee expressed earlier in Cherie. So we're really pumped about having this, and it's kind of been a whirlwind ever since, right?
It's not stopped.
And Cherie talked about her training wheels on your motorcycle. So I learned to ride a bike when I was 3. And I learned how to do that by tearing the training wheels off of the bicycle and teaching myself how to ride the bike, because my older brothers and sisters would not.
She tore the wheels off.
I tore them off, literally. Yeah, I think that's how I remember it, because I got in big trouble, right?
Probably, yeah.
If you've been metal long enough, it'll stay.
I know we have the other state that's going to introduce themselves, but I just noticed that one of our partners who's been very invaluable to our work lately is also one. Of course, there's Amy Gomer Erickson. She's on our team too with evaluation. I'm guessing a lot of you know her. Curious to know what's interesting about her, but also Erin Hambrick is on. And Erin, would you introduce yourself?
Yes. Okay. I'm glad my video worked. I'm on a brand new computer. We've had some growing pains. Yes, I'm Erin Hambrick. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I study children with trauma histories. And so that is kind of what connected me with the current team. Can you remind me the prompt? Sorry, my computer's been so distracting. Huh?
Something interesting about you that we wouldn't know.
I used to be in a band. I played guitar.
Did you wear Doc Martens?
No.
Oh, not that kind of a band, huh? Chucks at least? Come on. Okay. Thank you, Erin. And I'm actually going to make some of those, a lot of these connections for you and really kind of talk about what drove this work more when we get into our presentation. But I know we're limited on time. And Jennifer, did you want our other state that's presenting to introduce?
I think Annette's going to introduce herself right before she starts her content so that everyone has that connection.
Okay. So am I good to jump in at this point? Get going?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay. Thank you everybody for joining us. We have a lot, we're really excited to share the work that we've been doing here in Kansas with you all. And do have a very limited amount of time to do that. And as I was sharing it with Lee and Carrie, they were, both, saying, well, add more, be sure you squeeze that in. And so basically I did what I'm pretty sure is now an evidence-based practice or somewhere listed on NERN, which is if you take all of your content and put it into one slide, it means you just go a lot faster and, talk faster. And I think that that's probably, now a new best practice. Just kidding. I am going to go through this quickly, but I am going to touch on the highlights that really, I hope provide you guys with some information on how you might begin pulling in community partnerships. And Jennifer started off talking about the importance of relationships. that cannot be underemphasized. I would say that is a lot of why we've been able to pull off what we've pulled off here. And not only that, but for those of you who are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study and trauma and working with children, relationships are fundamental to everything that we do. Brené Brown, we're wired for connection. That's essential. So I've had this slide up for a while. I'm not, and you guys had the information we sent out in advance, so I'm not going to review the objectives with you. But it basically, we hope you know who we are and what it is we do and how we've pulled this off before this is all said and done. For those of you not familiar with the structure here in Kansas, there's the Kansas State Department of Education, where Carrie Haig, who introduced herself, is the Assistant Special Education Director. And TASN, I always say, is kind of like the right hand to KSDE. So we carry out their marching orders. And TASN consists of several different projects that can be found on one of the links I shared to the School Mental Health Initiative. There's a page for projects on there. All of those projects work together to enhance and support our Kansas MTSS integrated framework. And there, you know, we partner most closely with Families Together, Kansas Parent Information Resource Center, and of course our evaluation project to ensure that we're making progress and getting teams what they need. As Lee said, you know, she brought me on to Autism and Tertiary Behavior Supports back in 2014. I was the first school social worker that was brought into TASN. So the first mental health professional licensed by the Behavioral Sciences and Regulatory Board, and was brought on to help with providing technical assistance to, you know, our children with the most significant needs in the state of Kansas, consulting with school districts. A little bit about me, because this part is essential. It is key to understanding, I think, just kind of how we got this momentum going for this School Mental Health Initiative and this cross-system work that we are doing, which is been the challenge and the reward. So yes, my background is in school social work. I'm a clinically licensed social worker, which means I'm trained in diagnosis and treatment. I have 17 years of experience in the field of school social work and mental health practices within an MTSS framework. Have actually taught school social work at the University of Kansas and provided professional development at Ottawa University around the needs of immigrant Latino students. In my direct practice days, I specialized in working with our Spanish-speaking population and doing special education evaluations for culturally and linguistically diverse students. I eventually worked at the Kansas Institute for Positive Behavior Supports with Rachel Freeman, where I trained schools in school-wide positive behavior supports. And also at that time, they had a project where they were training community mental health centers and psychiatric residential treatment facilities in the functional behavior assessment process. And that's where I really started to gain a strong working knowledge at that time of that interconnected systems framework. And then I worked at Kansas Secondary Connections in transition with Dr. Mary Morningstar, and worked with schools supporting them in the area of transition. At that time, started working on a behavioral work group within TASN, and that's where I met Lee Stickle, who honestly, working for her has been, I'm not just saying this because she's on there, has really been, I just could not be more grateful for it. Lee is one of those leaders that sees somebody's strengths and leverages them. And she also sees those needs and jumps right on into addressing them. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what in Kansas is called the Governor's Behavioral Health Services Planning Council Children's Subcommittee, because this is where I started to meet and make relationships that set us up to be able to do this work today as well. But basically, like Lee said, you know, we started getting more and more requests where not even where they're just co-occurring disorders, but maybe even kind of questions around differential diagnosis, right? So we get a lot of requests, yes, to work with children that might have autism or do have autism, but then there's also children with significant histories of trauma. And, you know, in the world of diagnosis, you're always having to rule out and look at other factors that lend a hand to, you know, whatever. I'm not big on diagnosis in general. That's a whole different story. But under really understanding children. So anyways, at that time, I was on this children's subcommittee and providing trainings to, you know, assisting with functional behavior assessment trainings, et cetera. And just kept giving Lee an earful about mental health and really plugging that. And she must have gotten tired of me one day because she said, Cherie, do what it, you know, do this work, you know, do what it is, you know, that where these needs are. And she allowed me at that time. She bought me a friend, Kristen Sheldon. Kristen came on board and was able to help me start to put together a school mental health resource that was requested by this children's subcommittee I'll tell you about. Basically, and you guys are probably familiar with this, what we know is that schools are the de facto mental health system. And as ATBS began to receive these requests, you know, it became clear that we did not have a system in place to navigate school mental health. We know by now, hopefully all of you are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And we know that children with significant ACEs, that's the acronym for that study, have poor academic and mental health outcomes, and that it does not just impact our children and youth. In fact, the study was done on adults. So one, it's us, but then when we're supporting those children and youth, there is the toxic stress, the burnout, and everything that goes along with that, which I think that maybe after a few years, has it been a few years, couple of years of a pandemic, a lot of people are feeling more and more. There was also at this time in the beginning, a report that came out of the University of Kansas specific to schools and mental health right there in Kansas. And they had identified, you know, that teachers were concerned around consistencies in services, relationships with family, access to services. And you can see here that 84% of Kansas educators agreed or strongly agreed that they needed further professional development in the area of mental health and trauma, as well as PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports. So as all of this came about, the Children's Subcommittee, which is a federally mandated mental health services planning and advisory council to the Secretary of the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services and the Kansas governor, requested somebody from TASN, that right-hand arm to KSDE, be on that subcommittee. I served on that subcommittee from 2014 to 2019, first as a member, then as vice chair, then as chair, and then as past chair. And that's where I really started to understand. I've always been a systems girl as a school social worker. I've always known if I wanted to help the kids I'm working with, I have got to address the systems. But it was on this subcommittee that I really started to see more of those state level barriers, if you will, and at the same time was able to identify the shared priorities and needs across not just districts and the Department of Education, but all of the community mental health partners that are on that group. So this group consists of your state level stakeholders from foster care, juvenile services, psychiatric residential treatment facilities, community mental health centers, so on and so forth. And we really all had a shared agenda, but we were all, of course, working separately. At the same time, TASN Behavior Work Group was identifying that there was need to, you know, assist with students that had been identified as emotionally disturbed or serially emotionally disturbed. KSDE was getting an increase for suicide prevention training. There was some legislative activity around child sexual abuse prevention and mandated reporting. And the Children's Subcommittee was making a request and trying to beg, borrow, and steal what was called a school mental health resource for Kansas schools. And so at that time, Lee, we were able to, under that Autism and Tertiary Behavior Supports Group, kind of start to form the baby school mental health initiative, where we put that resource together. That's down here in the left-hand corner. I was actually going to use my little annotative thing. Let me see if I can do that really quickly here. So this school mental health resource, which can be found on our website, talks not only about, I was very intentional in that not only did it provide schools with information on mental health issues and what teachers can do about it, but that it also explained in there to community partners and families outside of the school how the school works and where they might be able to jump in and align their efforts and service, their efforts with us. We also began to provide regional trainings on the impact of toxic stress and trauma to educators. And I've got to tell you guys, it was very well received. Really, we approached it from the perspective of addressing the well-being of adults. And it was then that they were able to translate that information to children and youth. Could go on about that, but we'll save that for another time for the sake of time. KSDE started to, as they started to recognize this need and up their game to meet these needs, we started to increase awareness around and promote better utilization of school employed mental health professionals. A lot of people are not aware of the skill sets that your school psychologists, school counselors, school social workers have, and they don't always leverage those skills to the extent that they could be utilized. So one thing was not only raising awareness around that, but I also sought to, a lot of you might know that sometimes those people don't always play very well together. There can be some competitiveness. And so I actually leveraged some relationships that I had in the school district that I'd previously been working with, and also our school mental health professional associations to leverage those relationships to pull those groups together and help them unite and align efforts and realize that they could be stronger together. We all belong at the table. And that was very helpful. Then our Kansas MTSS integrated team, they brought on Christina Mann, who was a community-based services director for a community mental health center. Well, she started to leverage those relationships. Are you catching on to this relationship theme here? And I say relationships, you guys, because there is, believe me, I do not have I've got some political opinions, but I am not into politics. I am the last person, right? I'm not the person that schmoozes and schmoozes. But authentic relationships where people actually see you as an ally. And that's what Christina Mann had with our community mental health services. And she sent out a survey you see on this slide where she's just even asking, hey, community mental health centers, would you be willing to work with schools and align your efforts? And in what areas? So we started to gather that information and we're starting to build a case here, right? Well, KSDE and the State Board of Education, they leveraged this momentum then that was being built. I say kind of on the ground, they're at Tassin kind of in the middle, right? Where we're mediating those worlds. And a few things happened at that point. The State Board of Education requested that Kristen and I put together a school mental health framework. They were very much emphasizing community and family. And that's kind of what you see over here on the left. I will tell you that this, you guys, if you're familiar with Wisconsin's work, this was definitely adapted from From them. We've always loved Wisconsin stuff. So we got to peek in on them from time to time and see what they've got going on. So the State Board of Education latched onto the school mental health framework. At the same time, they started what was called a School Mental Health Advisory Council, which is similar to that children's subcommittee, except that it's more focused on the educational side of things. And that, again, is made up of a group of stakeholders from different areas. And you can see here what their purpose is. Well, then the great Carrie Haig over here, really, she's passionate about this work and saw what was taking place and the needs, and they were feeling it at KSDE as much as we were feeling it out there in the field. And so she wrote, submitted a proposal for the current SPDIG. I think that's an acronym I'm safe to use with this group, right? So that's what happened there. And then got to move my mouse back over here. So then begins the School Mental Health Initiative. Today, we have some exceptional partners. You got to meet earlier my girls here, Laura, Kristen, myself, Amy. You can see us on the slide. I want to tell you that when we brought people on, we were very intentional about them having multidisciplinary backgrounds. Mental health is the responsibility of everyone. I should save that for the slide when I get to it. Kristen over here is keeping me on track. I keep seeing this timing pop up and then I'm like, okay, go faster yet. But basically, we were very intentional about that. We initially had on board, we've had a special education teacher who was on the core MTSS team. We had Kelly McCauley, who her background is in foster care, and she also worked with the, help me out here, ladies, what was it?
Work with the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Annie E. Casey Foundation, thank you. And we've also had a school psychologist on our team, everybody informing this work. I got to tell you, while three of us right now are social workers over here, Amy Wells, like she said earlier, is a former elementary administrator. And can I just tell you guys how she has been invaluable? It is these, and when I say invaluable, it's because of course we care about mental health, right? I'm a social worker, I care about mental health. But then when you can get Amy in front of other administrators and she's speaking into her passion and why we've got to address that, they hear. So it's really the voices of these different people coming together. In fact, those voices are so important. I'm gonna move quickly here so I can tell you about our trauma responsive support plan, which is basically like your traditional functional behavior assessment, except for it incorporates those pieces around neuroscience and the adverse childhood experiences study and what we know about trauma. So it incorporates pieces that aren't inherent in that functional behavior assessment process. And I actually presented on this at one of our SPDIG conferences. It was the last one that we had in person, and it was very well received. There was one woman there that asked, how did you get your behaviorists and your school psychologists and your mental health professionals to like all come together around this? She's like, I'm a BCBA. And a clinically licensed psychologist and a school psychologist, and I'm having a hard time getting these groups to work together. Honestly, you guys, it is the relationships and these people that you see down here in the bottom left-hand corner. We had Rich Harrison, who's a behaviorist that we have a strong relationship with, and he understands trauma. We had Dr. Linda Aldridge, who is a former special education director that's well respected. Dr. Rick Gaskell, who was executive director of one of the community mental health centers and a fellow with the Child Trauma Academy, which is Bruce Perry's group. And then Rick Gaskell introduced us to Erin Hambrick, who introduced herself earlier, and she always just mentions her work as a UMKC professor, but it just so happens that she is the director of research for the Child Trauma Academy as well. And you can see here that we have some other key partners that help us with the neuroscience piece and addressing not just the behavior, but that mind-body connection, which we know is so essential to understanding if we're going to be addressing trauma. So let me skip on to my next little slide here. How did we do this? Hopefully by now you all are familiar with that interconnected systems framework that came out of PBIS. And it's a roadmap of, Lucille Eber and Susan Barrett, some of the best who we've all idolized. And their work really kind of provided a roadmap for us to do the work we do. Now, I can always tell you it looks different in practice, right? We're like, man, here's a step-by-step manual. We got this. And then we're like, whoa, got to switch some things up. But it really served the foundation for the work that we do. Key messages for those of you that aren't familiar with that interconnected systems framework are implement through a single system of delivery, right? No more can we afford to have our community mental health centers and our school districts work in isolation. We are all working with children served across systems. We're all collecting data and looking at it in isolation, and we're all doing our own thing. It is that we come together and align our processes and practices. Mental health is for all. Hey guys, I'm sure, especially now at the end of the pandemic, we know. I mean, it's not like mental health is just for some people. It's for all of us. Access is not enough. Here's the thing. In schools, we typically think that if a child has a mental health issue, we can just make a referral and that takes care of it, right? But it's not even just that. Sometimes we make a referral and we don't really know what's going on with the child and we don't have an aligned plan. So access is not enough. We're simply saying that gaining access to school mental health programs is an insufficient metric of effectiveness. And then here's the key. There are strengths to all of our systems here, right? Mental health professionals obviously have, strengths in their area of work. Education does ours. What I can tell you I really appreciate about education is that we have this MTSS framework. It gives us a structure and a process for analyzing and looking at data. And so we utilize that framework to align cross-system efforts. This visual on the slide here is key because you'll see that for the community, what on the school side, we mostly consider, we consider tier 3. For the community, that's actually their work. That's where they start. This is an essential point here because part of how we were able to engage community partners, and right now we've got community mental health centers, juvenile services, and foster care at the table on our teams. And it's understanding that they are funded to serve those children and youth with the most significant needs. And that's their priority, and meeting them where they're at around that shared priority is essential to getting them to the table, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about this. So how did we start to align these systems? We pulled together what we call intentionally a district community leadership team, district community. We do a lot of work to emphasize community. And that's because if your community partners think that this is a district initiative, they start to check out, right? Because they've also got their priorities. So it really must be seen as a mutual effort. What you see here is one of our exemplar teams. This is the Manhattan Ogden School District and Pawnee Mental Health Center. You'll notice the executive level leadership, we have to have them at the table. We have our special education director, superintendent, and our executive leadership from the Community Mental Health Center. We then have our coaches, our district level coaches, who kind of serve as the facilitators between the district community leadership team and those building teams. And then we have those, we call them building agency coaches, because the idea is that everything they do together. And you can kind of see here this self-correcting feedback loop. I really want to get to this video to show you guys some of this great work that's come out But earlier I mentioned this trauma responsive support plan. This is an example of one thing that that team earlier, all of our teams, but this one's going to speak into this in this video, have come together to plan around. So how do they do this? I've already told you that a trauma responsive support plan is one that incorporates components, mental health components that address trauma. And it's slightly different from a functional behavior assessment, not in the intensity of, data collection, et cetera, but there's a few key things different. One, it's done collaboratively. It's not just a school psych or a school social worker going in and doing an FBA. It is a community mental health coach and a district coach doing the assessment process together and gathering that data and facilitating the meeting. It is done jointly. It accounts for the cultural context and the biopsychosocial factors. That's a big word, but basically we know as we talk about trauma and mental health, these things aren't separate. We are holistic beings. So biological, psychological, and social are how our social worlds impact us. It actually incorporates an emphasis on self-determination and focuses on resilience. What you see here is actually our process that we walk teams through, process being the teaming and planning, database decision-making. When they plan to implement something, they actually account for each of these process components. They develop a SMART goal and of course an action plan. Up here you see the process, which is they assess implementation. They work through the process questions, they develop a SMART goal, they develop an action plan, and then they monitor for progress. And we've seen our teams come a long ways and they come back and always kind of assess where they're at. So at this point, what I want to do is share a video. I've only got maybe 2 more slides after this. I'm going to kick it off, but I want to share this video so that you can hear from the field the difference it has made to have our community partners working together. So I am going to get this little guy out of my way here. And play a clip for you. Presumably. Okay, I'm almost there.
Yes, I can start first and then Andrea can jump in. It was a little over a year ago that we went through this training and process with USD 383. And most of us were familiar with each other, but I feel like this training and process really bonded us even more, which has allowed us to develop our teams, I think, even quicker. So I think the more you can develop that relationship between the CMHC and the school district, the better it will be. And we were very lucky to have a school district that wants to involve us in all processes. So I think that was pretty key as well. We quickly realized that as big as USD 383 is in Manhattan and Ogden, we wouldn't be able to handle this whole process ourselves because when we took the information back to the school, we thought we would start with 3 schools, a high school, a middle school, and an elementary. And the staff at the schools were so excited to have this process and to be able to begin working with the children and youth on this process, that we were getting more than just the 3 referrals. Everybody wanted to do it. So I think we're kind of like, what do we do? And we learned that we needed to get our teams involved. So the special ed teams at schools, our therapists and our case managers. And so we decided that the sooner they all had that knowledge or process and use some of the same language, the better off we would be as far as providing services to the youth that we have common relationships with. So I think February-ish, we had a training with our special ed staff at the schools. We invited our school-based therapists and our school-based case managers, and we went through this abbreviated process with them with a lot of help from the TASM team, because we were new as well. So it was hard for us to do that. So we went through the training. Unfortunately, right after that, COVID kind of hit. So we kind of got stalled out a little bit, but we're back up and going again. And we're already getting a lot of referrals now that we know how to do this via Zoom or, work with the technology available to us. So it's been a really good process. I think the other thing I wanted to
Bree, don't mute.
lots of commonalities. And so that's been really good for us to be able to bridge that gap and be able to share some of the same plans and information that we know that was mentioned just a little bit earlier in that collaboration slide. Andrea, what did I forget?
I think you did a great job summarizing our efforts. I might just come from the just a little bit different perspective and how it's impacted our school community. We were at our training a year ago talking about a student that we had found, received Pawnee services, met criteria for the district, and developed a really solid plan without that other school team there. But then while we were there sitting at the table, we got another phone call. We have another kid in need and we need this team to be there. So it all happened quickly, and it just really highlighted the need for us to come together as a team. I think traditionally FBAs and behavior intervention plans are done more in isolation and not done with the whole picture, the whole student and all the needs in mind. So I think this has really helped us identify that we need to dive a little deeper. We can do a little better with coming together as teams and looking at that whole child. I think the thing that stood out for me the most when we were doing this and starting this was focusing on the child's strengths and resiliency characteristics. And I think that sets the tone for every meeting that we've had with schools and with parents sitting next to us. We want to know the great things about your child. We see what they bring to the table. And I think that helps shift that focus that from that problem behavior, that was terminology that was used before. We're not focusing on the bad, we're focusing on how we support and how we make better. I think really the other parts that were highlighted when we were working with teams, and probably those of you that are doing this have found this as well, but teams were really good at collecting anecdotal data. They collected novels and novels and novels of stories and scenarios, and they're spending so much time collecting data that doesn't drive us a certain direction. So it's really helped us highlight the need to focus our efforts on what kind of data do we need for teams? How can we simplify that so we can not spend all our time writing a novel, but we are actually tracking what needs to be tracked. So we know we're making data informed decisions and we know we're implementing interventions and if they're working or not. Or not interventions, supports, and if they're working or not. The other thing that really stood out to me through all of these is through all of our support plans that we've done is, we ask teams to find a chunk of time, 2 hours time to come together, to sit down with our training team and its members from our district and from Pawnee. But how hard is it to get everybody around the table for that long of time? When we work in the school system, when we're busy days, that's hard to find that time, but we show that we're making a commitment to the success of the child. And I think that's another piece that has been really powerful through this process. So it's been wonderful. It's probably been one of the most meaningful efforts that I've been a part of in my 19 years in education. So I'm thrilled to be here again this year.
Okay, so while this was going on, I obviously muted my microphone to be quiet, and then I got messages that people could hear me typing. So I'm a hot mess over here with that. But I am out of time, so I am just going to wrap this up by saying that to date, we currently serve 5 different community mental health center regions. We say regions and we utilize community mental health centers because when you guys think about how hard it is to build sustainability, capacity, whatever within a district, just imagine how much harder that is for our community mental health centers, juvenile services, foster care. So as we think about the amount of time we spend supporting districts when doing community work, cross-system work, be prepared to spend some more time in that area. We now have like an application process that we've developed. We've had a workshop that included Dr. Bruce Perry and all of these state community partners that you can see here. The work has been phenomenal. It's been very rewarding. We have gotten incredible feedback, and Lord knows we have learned a lot. And we're really hopeful that we can sit with our communities and continue to support them in growing in this area. So a lot more that I would love to say, and hopefully my ramble made sense, and that I met my timeline here. So
We also had Amy add +9 districts and 4 special education cooperatives, juvenile services, and DCF. Don't forget.
okay, I had all of that in my notes. That's just it. I was like, nope, I gotta wrap it up. No, you guys, yes, we have all of those people at the table, and they're passionate about the work, and they've been holding each other up at a time when everybody is feeling fatigued and maybe even hopeless because we're losing staff and people left and right.
Right.
I can tell you these teams we are stronger together. It sounds cliche and cheesy, but that's the truth of it. And relationships make or break.
Yeah. Being needed, having a mission, having folks that you feel a connection with, who you're working on that mission with.
Authentic relationships.
Big, yes, authentic relationships. Thank you so much for the whole Kansas team, for being here, for sharing your journey, and for doing this work and being willing to not just share your resources, but the adventure that it was to get to this place. Thank you for doing all of that and for being very open with us about what it took. I know others here, I can see, I know other states that are also undertaking this journey right now. So Annette Young is up next, and Annette where is she? I'm looking for her on my screen. There she is. Okay. Took me a minute. Annette, some of you may remember that she received the SPDIG Leadership Award this last year, and it is well deserved. She has been such an important part of the SIG network effort from day one and continues to be. I'm going to let her introduce herself as the other group did. She's going to talk about how she got to this work, why it's important to her, and also share one fact about herself that most people don't know. I'm also going to be handing over the facilitation to John Lind, who we're always glad to see his smiling face here. I'll still be on by phone, but John will be available to you on Zoom. So Annette, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate the invite. And I'll, while I'm doing this, I will find my, I had it here somewhere. Uh-oh. Oh, now I'm going to totally talk about panic, Cherie, when, oh no, I lost it. Kelsey or John, can you pull it up for me? I had to shut my VPN off and I killed my connection. Thank you. You are so awesome. So I'm sorry about that, everybody. For those of you that haven't met me, I am Annette Lucio Young. I am with the Montana Office of Public Instruction. And I've come to this work in 36 years in education and 16 as a champion of youth who are marginalized. And it really is, I've never lost focus that, oh, okay, thank you, Mary. I've never lost focus that the children are what it's all about. And so I'm also in the process of trying to steal a cat. And so I call her Rochanda, Roro for short, and simply because she is extremely chubby, so chubby that in fact she could actually be a Chico, not a Chica. And so, and with my potential theft, it's all about the relationship. There's no food involved, but Roro and I are making progress. So that is probably something that none of you figured that I would be, is a potential cat thief. So I'll keep tabs on that for you, and we'll see how I do. So I think she kind of picked me. So I just joined her. You know, she wants to come, I'm all for it. So today we're going to take a look at the emerging Montana ESSEP. And I specifically use that term because, oh, I'm not running. I'm sorry. Kelsey, could you just, on emerging, could you just back up for just a second for me? Thank you. So the term emergence is the theory that simple rules interact with one another in complex ways to shape a change process, the outcome of which cannot be predicted. And for those of us, thank you, Kelsey, and I'll go to the next one. For those of us doing this work in this the big world and the ESSEP world, we absolutely know that beyond our best intentions, that our outcomes rarely can we predict how they're going to turn out, and that we have so really little that we have control over. And so I shared with you two truths about myself, how I came to this work and that I am a cat thief, a potential cat thief. And I steal these two truths in a dream from Will Wise. He is the deceased business partner of Chad Littlefield out of We and Me. Peg Sullivan introduced several of us to We and Me, and I just fallen in love with their work. And I'd like you, as I'm going through Montana's ESSEP design process, I'd like you to think about your truths around the work that you do. And I'd also like you to take a moment as I am sharing the truths in the ESSEP design in Montana, and I will share my dream at the end. And I'd like you to think of your dream. It can be small, it can be big, but think about the potential your dream can have. And we'll have a moment, Kelsey, we'll break this into some breakout groups in a little bit here. And hopefully some of you will be willing to share your truths and your dreams, because individually and collectively, our potential is pretty powerful. And so thank you, Miss Kelsey. We'll move on. So in 2006, my dream began. I was one of, I didn't know that was my dream at the time, but I was honored to be one of the first 10 people in the state of Montana to be hired in this brand new federal movement called the School Improvement. And so our cadre was powerful. We did an icebreaker activity where we had to pull a penny out of our pockets and look at the date. And all of my colleagues were saying, well, I graduated with my master's, or I've been teaching for 30 years, or I mean, just all of this stuff. And the date on mine literally put me at about 1 year old. And so my answer was I was practicing being cute. So because that's really bad about 1 year old. So that is the power behind this team that I have the pleasure of working with, and I would become a school-wide coach. We had phenomenal training. I mean, the man himself, Larry Lazat, trained us, as well as other amazing educators who had a vision for how you work with schools that are struggling. We, our operational manual was literally Larry's 9 formulas of effective schools, right from the very beginning, where we would go in and do the scholastic review teams and et cetera, and then we coached us with a lot of work with our schools that we were assigned. And so, let me just back up just a second.
Annette, this is John. As you're backing up, your audio is a little unclear to me, and I've gotten messages from other people that they're getting the same.
Okay, I don't know where my audio is. I'm on a machine that's not mine, so I'll try to sit still.
Thanks.
So my reality is that, you know, as I took a look at what we were doing, we were definitely working from a deficit model. We were never really welcome in the schools, and we were overwhelming the schools. An interview I had with a tribal elder was that she basically said, you know, we love that there are people who love and care enough about our children to try and make a difference, but you're basically not going to affect anything here because we need to make changes outside the walls of the school. By the time that first 5 years rolled around, one of our schools where we had actually seen significant progress, within 48 hours of our staff exiting and turning everything 100% back over to the school, it was right back to where it had started 5 years prior. Literally $7 million in supports in this school, a big $7 million up. And so, Ms. Kelsey, if we could go down. So I would eventually leave Title I at the OPI, and I would go and live and work as an administrator at a tribal college, and I would circle back. And when I came back to the agency, I would be in our special education division. And in 2019, I had an opportunity for my dream to be refreshed. And so I literally woke up one day and I'm the Montana ISSEP. And I literally, when I say I am the Montana ISSEP, yeah, I'm a team of one. And so I partner with our colleagues down in our Indian Education Department, and my Title I colleagues are integral in the ISSEP. And so as I looked at the job description, I thought, boy, this sounds oddly familiar to me. And our then director of special education, he said, yeah, I wrote it based on your credentials. And I said, well, I'll take it. And he says, oh, good, you start tomorrow. And he said, you have a blank slate. It's pretty straightforward expectations out of OSEP and make it happen. And so you're probably wondering, oh my gosh, you know, what is the it? So the it is our simmer, was and is. And our simmer in Montana is to increase graduation rates of Indigenous youth who are SPED identified. So what I did as I was working on this design process is I already had some pretty good ideas of what I didn't want to do, the lessons learned from my days in the SIG unit, lessons learned from living and working in a tribal community, and a better understanding of the history of the people that I was working with. And Kelsey, could you pop over that for me on the word serving? So a powerful book, if you really want just a quick, without you know, a lot of digging to get a good understanding of our Indigenous friends and neighbors, a powerful read is Kent Norburn's Neither Wolf Nor Dog. He also has 2 other books in that trilogy, and I really recommend them. That at a base level, though, Neither Wolf Nor Dog will give you just a great picture of what the community structure is like for these individuals. Thank you, Kelsey. So I also took a look at best practices in my design model. So best practices around everything from implementation science, what is, you know, really good thinking in special education. So my primary model of what I do train on and center everything we discuss is around an inclusionary model, and looking at professional development, you know, all of the intricacies of what's right and wrong there. And I made the decision based on what I knew not to do, which was make that radical data shift to qualitative, tucking the quantitative data always in the back of my mind, but promising myself that I would never, ever toss it at them and just leave them feeling completely dejected. And also looking at working through the lens of an equity transformation cycle. And so all of the work that we do is based on equity and opportunity. And so an ETC is a shift from evaluating outcomes to valuing well-being. Thank you, Ms. Kelsey. Also in the design, keeping it in the why. And so the why for myself and my my infrastructure activity partner is that these are real people who deserve to be respected and valued. They have truths, they have dreams, and bona fide, their actual well-being is dependent on the fact that we have relationships with them and that we value who they are and what they bring to the table. And Kelsey, could you highlight? Thank you. And so if we look at the definition for well-being, is a state in which educators and students experience healing, agency, joy, and connection as they dismantle oppressive practices and structures and cultivate deep learning for all. And we are really seeing that dismantling happening in some of our Montana schools. It's awesome. So also part of our design for the Montana ESSA is we are passionate believers and practitioners in restorative practice. It is absolutely our compass. Restorative practice from an Indigenous perspective is relationships. It's all about the relationships. And I borrow this phrase from my Indigenous coworkers, friends, and neighbors, that I definitely lead from the heart, that our ESSA, we lead from the heart, and when you lead from the heart, the rest will follow. My partner, my tribal consultation consultant partner, he and I were so serious about our conviction to restorative practice that we did create our own relational balance philosophy statement, which I won't read to you. You can take a look at that later, but it just helped guide, keep the two of us grounded in where we're coming from. I also am, and I promise you, Cherie and I did not sit down and compare notes. So you're hearing a lot of what Cherie talked about, and we didn't. So I am also a huge fan of Brene Brown. Absolutely, Cherie, great minds. I agree. I am absolutely a fan of Brene Brown, and she has really helped me put into place a lot of, maybe taper my passion. And if you can imagine, I'm about as polar opposite from the Indigenous staff that I work from. I'm Latina, I'm hyped up all the time, and they are more soft and gentle, and and so yeah, I can kind of be a whirlwind when they first encounter me. And so Brene Brown has really helped me put my passion into what I'm really trying to get at, and that's leading from a place of vulnerability. And Kelsey, if you would highlight that for me. And what I love about Brene Brown's definition of vulnerability is that it's the place where shame cannot live. And these children, these families, these teachers, they have been shamed and made to feel shame for centuries. And so this really resonated with me. And vulnerability, as Brene tells us, is the birthplace of joy, creativity, belonging, and love. Everything we want these beautiful, beautiful, brilliant children and their families to experience. Thank you, Ms. Kelsey. And then, of course, I'm tasked with working with special education teachers, and so I turn to a guru. Okay, what does my favorite SPED guru say? And that's Shelley Moore. And I live by Shelley's phrase: who are we to determine who can and cannot learn? And when I heard her say that, and I've heard her say it more than once, I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so true. And go ahead, Kelsey, thank you. And so an example of the power behind that phrase, in around 2010, the sweetest, most beautiful little baby, little Jack Benyon, was born. He was a micro-preemie. He had hydrocephalic, and he had cerebral palsy. John and Jessie, his parents, every medical professional that inundated them the first 24 hours of this precious little boy's life basically said, your little Jack does not matter. He will not accomplish anything in life. And I really firmly believe they were trying to convince these people to unplug him and let him die. Well, these parents, they've never heard Shelley Moore speak, but they were like, yeah, who are we to determine who can and cannot live? And they believed, and they fought. And pretty soon, little Jack was ready to head to kindergarten. And the school said, whoa, we're not equipped. Go to the bigger school, go to the neighboring district. We can't do this. And they said, oh, yes, you can. It'll be okay. So Dad, he wrote a book, and he introduced their son to his classmates through the adventures of Jack Pants, because in his daddy's eyes, little Jack is his superhero. And so what would happen in this school, and what John and Jesse didn't realize, is the beauty. Remember I talked about IDEA and in the inclusionary model, or maybe I didn't mention it's mentioned in IDEA. Well, what John and Jesse didn't know is in this tiny little school district, there was only one option, the general ed classroom. There was no such thing as a pull-out room. And so little Jack was constantly, day in and day out, when he was able to be in school, exposed to the general core curriculum. And the kids embraced him. And the last time I had a chance to check in on little Jack, he learned to walk in 2nd grade. That makes me choke up. Brilliance comes in different stages for the kids that we serve. And little Jack might be nonverbal, but he's beyond brilliant. And everybody celebrated. So who are we to determine who can and cannot learn? And he is absolutely my little hero, our little Jack Benny. So Shelley Moore always also tells us, always presume potential. Again, it's that strength, it's that relationship, it's that strength base. And oh, here's where I have the inclusion. And of course, that guarantee that they are exposed to the general core curriculum as much as physically possible. And a youngism is inclusion done right. And that is that a child comes in and out of that inclusionary model to best fit their daily needs. Thank you, Ms. Kelsey. We can keep rolling. So I've also designed around neuroscience. Again, Cherie and I did not get together. And so we absolutely know that there are a million flying pieces that we absolutely have no control over in this amazing work we do. We can try and control it, and it's not going to work. But the one thing we do have control over is developing, nurturing, and having amazing relationships with those that we work for and that we are working to improve conditions for them. That we know a safe, stable, and nurturing relationship and environment that for that child, when they are in my classroom, if I'm providing that, that cortisol drip will turn off just enough to let that dopamine rise up. And so maybe some of you thought, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And that was a potential cat thief. And so you might have giggled a little bit, and that helped raise your dopamine a little bit and get your brain better equipped to focus on what we were going to talk about today. Well, it's the same principle when we're working with our kiddos. We can get that dopamine level up just enough that they can do exactly what they need to do for us. And that's actively integrate with the teaching and learning that's happening. But the beautiful thing, and I say it's beautiful because it's beautiful in the sense that it's just the God's truth, is that when they leave our care, that dopamine will drop and that cortisol level will increase because they have to protect themselves in some of the environments that they live in. It's just a fact of life. We also know that children who interact with their environment through adult actions can become adults who interact with their environment through childlike actions. So Dr. Ross Green, he has a famous saying that most of you are probably aware of, that kids can do better if we let them. So another youngism embedded into the Montana ESSET design is that teachers can do better if we let them. So I never interact with a teacher, I never treat a teacher or an administrator from the perception that they are a bad educator. I don't believe there's such a thing as a bad educator, that it's really my job to provide the right supports so that their brilliance can shine. We can keep scrolling, Miss Kelsey, thank you. Oh, I'm so glad Kelsey saved my life here today. So we have 2 activities in the Montana ESSET because that's plenty to keep us busy, because I'm a staff of 1, remember, and I partner with my buddy in our Indian Ed department, and he's a staff of 1 on the tribal consultation as well. So my Critical Friends Network is our evidence-based activity. It's where I provide the professional development. I provide a safe stable and nurturing environment for us to come to the table, talk all things SPED. Inclusion is always our main conversation piece. And that no one of us is the almighty expert, but we all have a level of expertise, and we come and we learn together and we grow together. I recently had one of my teachers tell me, because you don't always know if you actually are having an impact. She just said to me on Monday, she said, I knew in my heart that no matter what, I had to be here today, and it was the best decision I've made in my day. And I was like, okay, our SF design and folks, we're developing relationships 100% virtually, because we are still pretty much almost forbidden from doing any travel in Montana. So there's some other things that went, you know, I used Marcia Vox e-coaching continuum, and then Kelsey, if you would just highlight, yes, and then my CFN is based on Decimon's 5 features of effective professional development: content focus, active learning, coherence, duration, and collective participation. Thank you, Ms. Kelsey. And so our infrastructure improvement activity is our tribal consultation process. And the wonderful thing about that is that it's governed by our Montana ESSA framework, and particularly our section 8538 of our ESEA. And it literally is the nudge that gives our tribal elders the opportunity to finally have their voice heard, valued, and respected. If you would just highlight for me nudge, Kelsey. And so nudge theory, if you're not familiar, advocates change in groups through indirect methods rather than by direct or instruction. Central to the nudge concept is that people can be helped to both think appropriately and make better decisions by being offered choices that have been designed to enable these outcomes. And that theory really encapsulates what we're doing with our tribal elder voice, and not part of the tribal consultation, because that is strictly bringing our tribal elders and finally giving them a voice in education for the youth in Montana. But an offshoot of that is we also have a youth voice that is rising. It just gives me goosebumps. So in our tribal consultation, we do use the roots of Indigenous restorative practice, again, of course, to gain a deeper understanding of traditional Indigenous ways of being, teaching and learning, connecting to cultural roots and heritage, and walking in both worlds. And I'll share with you in a moment the power of what's happening for these kiddos walking in both worlds. We can keep going, Ms. Kelsey. Self-actualization is also a critical aspect of our Montana ESSA design. Self-actualization, in our opinion, is the prevention for our Indigenous youth. It's the power of being centered in your roots. It's what defines and motivates a person. So if you'll think about Maslow's hierarchy and flip that hierarchy. So for our Montana tribes, Maslow, which some of you may not know, when he was a student creating his hierarchy, his professor said, well, you really need to try this out on somebody before you say it actually works. So he actually came to Montana and he lived and worked and studied the Blackfeet tribe in Montana. And he just got it backwards, everything he had. So from a tribal perspective, it's actually the self-actualization that is your basic need. That if you have that and you are connected to who you are, then everything else you can survive through lack of food and shelter and etc. And everything else will be easier to come into play. And we are just excited at what we're seeing. So we'll keep rolling here, Miss Kelsey. So a definite, and Kelsey, I won't need you to, oh yes, I will. No, I won't, sorry. So a definite shift in goal setting, that looking at, in this work, that we no longer wanted in the voice of Chip and Dan Heath. We no longer wanted the elephant guiding the rider, that we wanted the rider guiding the elephant. And so we don't design SMART goals. We don't work around SMART goals. They're just not effective in this manner. What we're looking at is goal setting under the acronym HARD, and that the goals, they're heartfelt, they're animated in a sense that it evokes a picture that repeatedly plays in your mind's eye. It's required and it's difficult. And so in essence, we are guiding the goal, not the goal guiding us. So if we can keep rolling, Ms. Kelsey. We did a radical shift, like I said, in the data, where we are looking at, and I won't go through all of this, but we're really looking at that street level data, always keeping satellite and map data, that quantitative aspect, it takes a back burner, but we are valuing who these people are, what they bring to the table, and really we are looking at always their truths and their dreams and focusing on how we support them based on that. We also engage what I interjected into the end, and we can go down to powerful conversations, Ms. Kelsey. So at the end of our fiscal year, our reporting year, I began adding with Donnie, my partner in tribal consultation, what's called a powerful conversation. And that's how we now wrap up our report year. And I steal or create or however. And so I won't give our answers, but a couple of the examples that we used in our powerful conversations. And it really gives us that chance to put our voice to the work we've been doing over the past year and really check in with each other, make sure we're still on the same page and that we still hold the same passion and belief. And so one of the questions we used this past December was, what will be the impact of these emergent historical shifts? Because we're seeing some amazing historical shifts happening in our schools. And the other question that we asked was, steel is tempered with heat. How might we see resistance is that which toughens up for the task ahead? And so, and just an aside, because I thought it was kind of ironic as I was finishing this up, I got an email in case any of you ladies were just dying to know, Matthew McConaughey uses powerful conversations. And so I just got an email that his Just Keep Living Foundation is engaging in a huge, powerful conversation with youth in Dallas, Texas in a couple weeks. So I thought, okay, we're doing the right thing. So obviously Matthew, as well as I, have read Priya Parker. So we'll keep scrolling to the next one. And I went through pretty quickly, but I want to make sure. So Miss Kelsey, if you could give us about 3 minutes, please. And she's going to break us out into groups. And I really hope that within the group, someone is willing to share their 2 truths and a dream. And then we'll come back and I'll wrap up the Montana essay. Well, thank you, everybody. I so appreciate that you took a moment to share your truths and your dreams if you were comfortable. And so, Miss Kelsey, thank you for putting us into breakout rooms. And so, as I wrap up my conversation with you today, I'm going to talk about how I'm dreaming forward. And so we've definitely had voices heard through our teachers are heard, our tribal elders are heard, and best of all, which just gives me goosebumps, is our students are being heard. We have schools where they start their day by smudging. And if you're not familiar with that Indigenous practice, it's basically the saying, tobacco down, prayers up. And so they start the morning in the school with a prayer to have a beautiful day of learning. Our youth, we had a young man who, his average is 65 points a ball game. And he had a classmate whose dream was always to play on the varsity team, but he never ever made the team in 4 years. He was always their manager. He went to every practice, you know the drill. This young man, in their very last regular season ball game of the year, handed his brother his complete uniform, and he said, "It's all yours, brother. Go out there and shine." And this kid who gave his uniform up was starting lineup. So here this kid, because all this kid's dream, he wanted to feel the floor vibrate underneath his feet as the crowd cheered them on. This is what we're talking about in self-actualization. It's happening. And these kids are doing these things without us forcing them as the adults in their life. That's just one example. Another dreaming forward is exploring data through an equity lens. So I'm in the process of developing a means of questioning your data through a lens of equity and opportunity. And my first two questions, I'm going to probably stick with the David Letterman model, top 10 questions. And so what beauty do you see in this data? And what bias am I possibly bringing to this data conversation? Another dreaming forward is, I just told Tom in our breakout room that my dream is to be more like Tom Delaney. And so I am going to continue to work on our graduation count. And Miss Jennifer Coffey reminded me of a Tom Delaney approach. And so if it worked for Tom, it's got to work for Annette. And so basically, no one knows there may be a glitch in your best laid plans until you let them know. So I'm going to have that conversation, that Tom Delaney-like conversation with that very important person at OSA. And my dream is I'm going to continue leading from the heart. And that I personally feel that it is completely cool that I get to nudge a historical shift through joy, creativity, belonging, and love. And I'm all in, and I'm ready to continue to toughen up, and amen to vulnerability. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Annette. You know, Montana's really lucky to have such a dedicated SSIP team, a team of one, that being you. So thank you for taking the time to share that and sharing it using shorthand, which of course the SIG Network is providing to SIG Network state members to share the stories that you have. So, you know, throughout all of today, I was thinking about relationships, and Annette, I can remember back to our first phone conversation. We probably spent 45 minutes talking on the phone that first time, and I've appreciated the relationship you've built with me, and it's clear you're building that professionally through the various stakeholders that you're working with. So thank you for that. And Kansas, you know, thank you for your time in presenting your trauma responsive support and the multidisciplinary teamwork that you guys are doing there. You know, again, relationship. And Sherry, you said authentic relationships, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's completely important in all of the work we do. So as you guys are signing off here, if you'll take a minute and write in the chat one thing that you plan to do based off of the presentations today. Not only sometimes does that help us cement our own plans, but it can let other people know things that you do, and it might help them think of things they can do. So again, thank you all for your time. Thank you for your presentation, Kansas and Sherry and Annette. And we look forward to seeing people at our next director's webinar next month. Thank you again. Bye.